The boarding pass was snatched from Jasmine Carter's hand, as if it were evidence of a crime. Rebecca Moore tightened her grip on the paper, her face expressionless, her sharp eyes scanning Jasmine from head to toe like she was examining an intruder. Ma'am Rebecca emphasized each word, her voice louder than necessary, so the entire cabin could hear. "I don't think you belong in this section." First class froze instantly, as if a cold fracture sliced through the luxurious air of the cabin. White lighting fell across Jasmine's face, a face disturbingly calm, while other eyes, mostly white men, followed her like they were watching a verdict, with an ending they already knew. This was the moment everything began. Jasmine stood still in the narrow aisle, the LED lights reflected in her eyes with a metallic gleam. No trembling, no retreat, no hesitation. Her posture was straight and controlled, as if she were forged from steel. Only one thing flickered in her gaze, the exhaustion of someone who had seen this far too many times. But Rebecca didn't see that, or refused to. All she saw was a black woman in a simple blouse, dark trousers, no expensive jewelry, no visible symbols of power. Someone who, according to her warped intuition, could not possibly sit in this cabin. "Identification," Rebecca ordered. Not a please, not even civility. Jasmine said nothing. She handed over her ID. Rebecca inspected it for so long it became intentional. Then she frowned as if the entire world was conspiring to trick her. Strange. Rebecca lowered her voice, just enough to ensure the nearby rows would still hear. A man in seat 3C narrowed his eyes. A young Latina woman looked at Jasmine with second-hand discomfort. An elderly black man in the second row glanced over his expression, saying, "Again, once more, once more." 3 hours earlier, Atlanta was drenched in harsh morning light. The airport was crowded. Jasmine walked into the terminal looking completely ordinary. A small bag, neatly tied hair, a simple grey coat. No one knew this woman was the new chief operating officer of Coast Air Airlines. No one knew this was not just a flight. It was a system experiment. Malcolm Keane, her assistant, handed her a latte and the boarding pass. "Everything's ready. 2 QA specialists already boarded. 3 more are monitoring live customer feedback on this route." Jasmine nodded. Yesterday's reports, Malcolm exhaled. 47%. Complaints from black passengers, skyrocketing. Most dismissed without action. And they hired me to end it. Jasmine said quietly, her voice sharp like a blade, freshly cooled. She didn't smile, didn't soften, didn't pretend. She was here for truth, and she feared no truth she had to touch. During boarding, Jasmine noticed the things others didn't or chose not to. Eyes, tone shifts, patterns in greetings. Terence, the ticket checker, greeted white passengers with warm smiles, small conversations, pleasant questions. With her, it was only a minimum sound. No warmth, no weight. She didn't react. She only recorded it in her mind, storing, comparing. Small fragments, but already forming a large, familiar picture, one she had seen hundreds of times. The way people judged who deserved to belong in luxury spaces. And now, in first class, everything she suspected was revealing itself with painful clarity. Rebecca returned her boarding pass with a gesture dripping in condescension. "What seat are you in?" 3A. Rebecca raised an eyebrow. "First class." 3A Jasmine nodded. No explanations, no justification. But she knew what was coming. Rebecca looked her over again, her stare wrapped in a thin layer of professionalism, barely hiding deep bias. Then she turned away, cold, rigid, hurried, as if carrying out a duty to remove something out of place. It felt like the camera pulled back, revealing the entire cabin. The white man behind Jasmine received a gentle, "Good morning, sir," from Rebecca, soft enough to be unrecognizable from the tone she used 10 seconds ago. The elderly black man's shoulders curled slightly, the posture of someone too used to being doubted. An invisible boundary split the space, a line unspoken but unmistakably present. Jasmine remained silent, but inside something moved, slow, deep, powerful, a rising wave. As she approached seat 3A, she noticed the looks aimed toward the row as if asking, "Is she lost?" Many of them worked in fields built on power, wealth, and connections. They were accustomed to evaluating others, determining who belonged to which tier of society. And Jasmine did not match the image they expected, which was exactly why she chose today to begin the audit. Suddenly, Rebecca reappeared behind her, her voice sharp as shattered glass. "Mum, I need to see your boarding pass again." In that moment, the cabin went dead silent, a silence thick with injustice, familiar enough to hurt. Jasmine inhaled softly, not out of fear, but to prepare herself for the moment everything would shift. She handed over the boarding pass. Rebecca checked it, then checked again, then checked a third time, as if Jasmine had given her something counterfeit. "Are you sure you bought the right ticket?" Rebecca asked, the implication unmistakable. Jasmine looked straight into her eyes. Her voice did not rise, her tone did not break, but something in her quiet power made the air itself tremble. "I'm sure." Rebecca pressed her lips together, nodded unwillingly, and walked away. But Jasmine knew this was only the opening act. The real test was ahead, and this system with its deeply embedded habits would expose itself under pressure. She sat down, fastened her seatbelt, and scanned the cabin like an investigator stepping onto the scene of a major crime. She knew exactly what was coming. And what Rebecca didn't know, not even remotely, was that she had just picked the wrong person to insult. Very wrong. Catastrophically wrong. Wrong enough that in 10 minutes, this entire flight, this entire day, and Rebecca's entire life would take a turn she could never imagine. The storm wasn't here yet, but the sky had already changed color. Rebecca returned to the cabin as if carrying a verdict already written. Her face was cold, her lips pressed tight, her eyes affirming what she had believed from the first second she saw Jasmine. She stopped right beside seat 3. Close enough to impose pressure loud enough for the entire cabin to hear. "There is an issue with your seat." Jasmine looked up. Her expression was calm, but inside, waves rolled quietly and deeply. She did not ask why. She did not ask if Rebecca was sure. She simply looked straight at her, the kind of steady gaze that made Rebecca freeze for half a second. Half a second was small, but enough to expose the crack in the flight attendant's certainty. That only made Rebecca more irritated. "I need to see your boarding pass again." Jasmine handed it over. No hesitation. No bowing her head. No lowering her voice. Rebecca examined the paper like she was checking the ID of a criminal suspect. She flicked her eyes repeatedly between Jasmine and the numbers printed on the ticket, forcing something ordinary to appear suspicious. Then the sentence Rebecca had been waiting to deliver finally broke free, sharp and ringing across the stillness of first class. "Seat 3A is not for you." Jasmine heard it, but did not react. She let the words fall straight to the floor, like something heavy and cold. Behind her, Harold Woodson turned his head, his eyes filled with the weary resignation of someone who had endured this too many times for it to shock him any more, leaving only a worn-out wound. The white man in 3B sat up straighter, glancing between Jasmine and Rebecca, his brows drawn together, as if he couldn't believe what he was witnessing. A Latina woman across the aisle stopped mid-page, gripping her phone tighter. The entire cabin held its breath. Rebecca continued her voice, carrying the weight of someone who believed she held absolute authority. There seems to be a system error. This seat is not supposed to be occupied. We can move you down to economy. The words down to economy fell like a sentence. A demotion. A removal. A way of reinforcing what she had believed from the start, that Jasmine didn't belong here. Jasmine placed the boarding pass on her thigh, her hand resting lightly on it, as if it were evidence, not a plea. My boarding pass was scanned and verified at the gate. I am not moving. Rebecca let out a thin, dismissive laugh. It was the laugh of someone convinced they held the truth, when all they truly held was bias. We are requesting your cooperation. If not, this becomes a security issue. The statement was thrown like a weapon, a deliberate threat, a tactic to twist power and turn the victim into the problem. Jasmine remained seated, back straight, unshaken. Her silence was so powerful that Rebecca stepped back half a pace without realizing it. Darren in 3B spoke before Jasmine did. This is not a system error. I saw her boarding pass scanned correctly. Rebecca whipped around, her irritation flaring as her authority was challenged. So please do not interfere. Darren did not look away from her. I will interfere when I clearly see something wrong. A passenger from the row behind leaned forward. Another lifted their phone. The air was turning into something volatile. Rebecca glanced around, seeing a tension building, seeing her control slipping. And then she said the line that pushed everything from wrong to catastrophic. There is a more appropriate seat for her. Somewhere she actually belongs. The cabin collapsed into silence. In a single breath, every gaze turned to Jasmine. Not out of doubt, but out of horror at the naked prejudice that had just been spoken aloud. Jasmine closed her eyes for 1 second. 1 second to gather every piece, Malcolm's statistics dismissed, complaints, repeated patterns of the same scenarios over the years, the people without power pushed out of seats they paid for. 1 second to compress the rising wave in her chest. When she opened her eyes, her gaze had changed. She was no longer the observer, no longer the insulted passenger. Something sharper, heavier, deeper had awakened inside her, a quiet but absolute authority. Jasmine stood. Slow. Precise. Not a single wasted movement. The cabin held its breath. Rebecca swallowed hard, instinctively stepping back again. Jasmine looked directly at her, her gaze no longer a question. It was a verdict. Are you sure you want to continue down this path? Jasmine's voice was not loud, but the temperature in the cabin seemed to drop, as if someone had shut off every source of heat. Rebecca froze. I'm just following procedure. What procedure? Jasmine asked, her voice quiet but heavy with the weight of an entire system about to be exposed. Rebecca did not answer. Couldn't answer. Jasmine took one more step. The entire cabin leaned toward her, both literally and figuratively. She didn't need to shout, did not need to explain, did not need to prove anything. Everyone could feel that something was about to be unearthed. A truth, a power, a revelation no one in this cabin had imagined. And Rebecca, who moments ago believed she controlled everything, was now the only one who didn't realize that the moment she feared most was coming. Only one more sentence. One more movement. One more breath before everything turned upside down. Rebecca stood in the aisle like someone who had just watched every ounce of authority slip through her fingers. Her earlier confidence shattered into fragments, visible in her quickened breathing, in her darting eyes, searching for an ally when no one dared stand beside her now. The cabin had become too quiet. A strange kind of quiet, compressed and taut like a metal wire, pulled to its breaking point. Jasmine still stood there, not needing to appear threatening. Her control lived in every calm breath, every precise movement, every steady heartbeat. That serenity was what made Rebecca tremble, and what made the entire cabin look at Jasmine differently. Not as a passenger anymore, but as a center of gravity. Someone who held the entire narrative in an invisible hand. Melissa, the junior attendant, approached, her face uneasy, her voice shaking, as if she wanted to tell Rebecca to stop, but was too afraid to say it out loud. Rebecca grabbed onto Melissa's presence like a final lifeline. "Melissa, check your system and confirm if seat 3A is empty. Say it." Melissa opened her tablet, her hand shaking so much she tapped the wrong icon several times. The screen lit up. The entire cabin watched the small device as if it were a verdict being cast. Melissa swallowed. I don't see any error." "Seat 3A is indeed." Rebecca snatched the tablet from Melissa's hands and clenched her jaw. "System errors do not always show up clearly. I am the one responsible here. I decide who stays in this cabin." Jasmine looked at her, her voice dropping low and cold, like the edge of a blade resting against someone's throat. "You decide based on what Rebecca inhaled sharply. The situation seemed to corner her, and when people without backbone feel themselves pushed to the edge, they lash out to escape. Based on experience, I know when someone does not fit first class." The words "does not fit" fell from Rebecca's mouth like an accidental confession. No one in the cabin could breathe. Darren shot to his feet. "That's enough." Harold, the elderly man, turned as well, his old eyes no longer tired but carrying a sorrowful sharpness like metal striking metal. After all these years and nothing changes. Alicia raised her phone, her voice ringing clearly through the tense cabin. "I am recording everything, and I will send it to the press if needed." Rebecca spun around and barked, "Turn that phone off." The entire cabin inhaled at once, a collective gasp of shock. She no longer had control over her own words. A passenger from the row behind leaned in with their camera, capturing the scene like a slow-motion explosion. Jasmine didn't need to look to know the wave was rising exactly the way she intended, but she also refused to let anger lead. Real power lived in staying outside the chaos. She sat down, slow, clear, intentional. The cabin tilted with the movement. Harriet, the middle-aged woman, in seat 4. A lifted a hand to her mouth. She is about to say something." Jasmine placed her hand on the armrest. A small movement, yet filled with the authority of someone who did not need to shout to silence an entire room. "I will ask one last time," Jasmine said, her voice not loud, but sharp as metal. "What is the exact reason you are demanding?" "I leave my seat," Rebecca blurted out instantly, like a reflex she had used too many times. "Because you do not look." She stopped. Too late. The cabin heard every syllable. "Look like who Jasmine asked." Her voice did not shake. It was not angry. It was simply direct, so direct that Rebecca no longer knew where to look. "Not like the passengers we usually serve in this cabin," Rebecca stammered, her voice breaking. In that moment, the cabin felt like it hiccuped. A truth exposed without Jasmine needing to force it. a truth that revealed itself under the weight of its own ugliness. Rebecca wanted to step back, but there was no room left to retreat. Melissa trembled, trying to intervene. "Rebecca, please stop," but Jasmine lifted one hand ever so slightly, not to silence anyone, but to make room for what she knew must come. The cockpit door opened. Captain Raymond Brooks stepped out, his stern face, steady stride, and scanning gaze carrying the familiarity of someone trained to handle crises. But it was not his arrival that silenced the cabin. It was the moment he saw Jasmine. His face changed. Recognition, respect, a flicker of alarm. And Rebecca saw it all. Captain Brooks straightened, adjusted his tie, then spoke. "Ms. Carter." The entire cabin turned their heads in one synchronized motion. Rebecca went pale. Jasmine simply looked at him, neither confirming nor denying. Captain Brooks took a long breath, stepped closer, his voice dropping low. "If I had known you were on this flight, I would have Jasmine cut him off with a glance at Rebecca, not allowing him to finish. No, you did not need to know. I needed to experience this flight like any other passenger." The cabin trembled faintly at the statement. A stillness before a major storm. Rebecca looked from Jasmine to the captain, then back to Jasmine. One final thought flared in her mind. No. No way. There is no way. I just insulted Malcolm had once told Jasmine during briefing. If they discriminate against you, it will be obvious. If they do not, you will simply be another passenger. But she was not just another passenger. Not today. Not in this moment. Not after Rebecca pushed her to the breaking point. Jasmine rose again, and the entire cabin tilted as if pulled toward the center of a storm. Her hand reached toward her wallet. Just one more movement. A gentle pull. Something was about to be revealed, and Rebecca knew. Knew in the way someone about to be judged knows that the verdict was written long before this moment. The entire cabin inhaled together. Jasmine opened the wallet. Cabin lights glinted off a small metal emblem, and the moment that would flip the entire balance of power on this flight was only one breath away. The metal badge flashed under the cabin lights, sharp and cold, like a blade slicing through the tension-thick air. Rebecca saw it first, and the moment she recognized it, her knees weakened, as if the cabin floor had dropped away beneath her. Jasmine drew the ID card out slowly, deliberately, precisely like a verdict being delivered through movement instead of words. The embossed text caught the Light Chief Operating Officer, Coast Air Airlines. No one spoke. No one moved. No one breathed. The entire first-class cabin slipped into a vacuum, with the only gravitational force being the woman standing in the aisle. Rebecca stood frozen, her lips parted, but no sound escaped. Captain Brooks halted mid-step, as if his own body had yanked him backward. Melissa raised a hand to her mouth, her tablet nearly slipping from her grasp. Darren straightened, witnessing what felt like a sacred shift in power. Harold remained still, but his eyes glimmered a mix of silent acknowledgement and the ache of a man who had endured this pain for far too long. Alicia tightened her grip around her phone, the recording steady, unwavering. Jasmine lifted the card to Rebecca's eye level. Her voice was low, smooth, each word hitting the cabin like a hammer striking metal. "This is my identity." Rebecca stepped back half a step, then another, her mouth opening to speak, but Jasmine gave her no room. "And you just insulted the wrong person. No shouting, no dramatics, but the force of the sentence carved a blazing red line straight through the cabin. Rebecca blinked rapidly, her breath jagged. Her body swayed slightly, as if unsure whether it could continue standing. I didn't know, Jasmine answered immediately. Calm, icy, because I didn't want you to know. Because I wanted to see how you treat me, the way you treat people with no power. The cabin shook with a silence so dense it was almost unbearable. Jasmine turned to Captain Brooks. I request the immediate suspension of the entire crew involved. Captain Brooks nodded sharply, like a man finally given permission to cut out the disease rotting inside his team. Rebecca trembled, her body shuddering. She wanted to speak, to beg, to blame the system, the misunderstanding her belief that she looked like someone easy to confuse. But Jasmine offered no escape. She looked directly at Rebecca, her eyes neither hateful nor brutal, but something far more devastating, perfect justice. You checked my ticket 3 times. You denied me water. You blocked me when I entered the cabin. You told me there was a more appropriate place for me, somewhere I belonged. Each word fell like a blade, stripping every excuse down to nothing. Rebecca broke. Tears streamed down her face, but no one in the cabin moved to comfort her. Not a single sympathetic glance, not one shared breath of pity, because everyone understood this moment was not about Rebecca. It was about a truth that finally had someone powerful enough not to be crushed by it. Jasmine turned back to the captain. I request the flight be cancelled. All passengers will be rebooked and compensated. The cabin erupted in murmurs. Some sighed. Some shook their heads, but no one objected. They had watched everything. Captain Brooks nodded again. I will make the announcement immediately. The air shifted like a sudden current. The procedures to cancel the flight began. Rebecca drifted ghost-like, barely conscious of Melissa guiding her away. Jasmine did not look after her. She didn't need to. She stood steady in the cabin, her breathing, even her heartbeat, unchanged, as if everything had unfolded exactly the way she predicted. Alicia stepped forward, her voice trembling but resolute. Thank you, Miss Carter. Because of you, this won't be buried. Harold nodded slightly, his eyes warming for the first time since the flight began. Finally, someone is speaking for us. Jasmine said nothing. She simply looked at their faces, at people who had lived under this pressure every single day, and that sent a cold shiver down her spine. Not from fear, but from clarity. This was not an incident. This was a system. The aircraft door opened. Light from the hallway spilled into the cabin, a harsh light exposing everything that had just unfolded. Jasmine adjusted her jacket, lifted her bag. She stepped out of the plane, first not rushing, not holding her head high, yet no one would ever look at her as an ordinary passenger again. She was not merely leaving a cabin. She was stepping into a much larger battlefield, one she had been preparing for a very long time, and Coast Air had just officially entered the greatest purge in its history. The stream of passengers began pouring off the plane like a chaotic current released from a broken dam. The tension still clung to the cabin, coating every seat, every armrest, every glance that refused to make contact. But the moment Jasmine stepped out, the air in the hallway shifted instantly, like a stage-changing scene's darkness giving way to the harsh glare of reality. Ground staff froze when they saw the captain walking right behind her, his face grave, his steps decisive. No one asked a question. No one dared to. Everyone could sense that this was no longer a minor incident. Jasmine didn't look around, didn't explain, didn't clarify. She walked straight ahead, as if the entire length of the corridor were a runway, made solely for her to pass through. Behind her, Rebecca was being helped off the plane, her face streaked with mascara, her lips trembling. Passengers passing by avoided eye contact. Not out of cruelty, but because they understood this was no longer about an individual. It was a system exposing itself through its own actions. At the gate, overwhelmed agents struggled as passengers crowded around demanding new flights. But that noise could not drown out the image of Jasmine, moving farther away, her posture still straight, her steps steady, her quiet presence, radiating like the calm center of a storm expanding outward. Malcolm appeared through the crowd, moving quickly, yet carrying his usual controlled composure. When he saw Jasmine, he understood everything immediately. "It happened, didn't it?" he asked softly. Jasmine answered with only one line, worse than projected. She did not stop. She did not let emotion slip through. She did not allow frustration to crack the precision in her mind. Every movement she made carried a steady, smouldering resolve. Not explosive, not violent, but strong enough for anyone near her to feel it, like heat radiating from forged steel. A woman from HR and a man from the legal department hurried over. They had seen the video. They knew the situation had escalated far beyond normal protocols. "Do you need a briefing room?" HR asked. Jasmine nodded. "Right now? And I want statements from key witnesses before they leave." Malcolm already knew what needed to be done. "I'll filter and bring the right people in. Head down first." Jasmine turned, but just before, moving her eyes met Harold's as he slowly stepped out of the aircraft. His cane tapped the floor with a steady rhythm. Harold paused. That gaze of his, a gaze shaped by years of witnessing, enduring staying silent, rested on Jasmine with heavy gratitude and the deep-seated sorrow of someone who had carried this burden far too long. "You did the right thing," he said, quietly. Jasmine stood still for half a second. His words did not make her proud. They did not make her feel victorious. They only made her chest heavier. Because the truth was, there was no victory here. Only wounds finally exposed to the light. She replied, "This should never have happened. Not to me. Not to you. Not to anyone." Harold nodded. A sad smile flickered briefly, but at least someone finally stood up. A group of passengers, Darren, Alicia, and a few from the back, began walking toward the meeting room, ready to testify. Their steps were quiet, unshowy, yet each footfall carried the weight of truth. Jasmine looked at them. Ordinary people. People without special power, without titles to shield them. But today they chose to stand on the side of justice, even though looking away would have been much easier. For a brief moment, Jasmine felt something shift inside her, small and fragile, but unmistakably the kind of shift that told her she was moving in the right direction. She continued walking. The meeting room waited below. The truth was converging toward her, and this system would not remain the same once she stepped into the investigation. No more stepping back, no more hiding, no more burying things under miscommunication reports. What happened on that flight was only the spark. As for Jasmine, she was about to walk into the room carrying an entire barrel of fuel. The temporary meeting room, repurposed on the airport's office floor, closed shut the moment Jasmine stepped inside. The small space, lit by stark white lights, pouring down onto the long table, looked far more like an interrogation chamber than a workplace. But that was perfect. Truth always rose clearest under cold light. Jasmine sat at the head of the table. She did not lean back. Her hands rested firmly on the surface, steady, precise, without a single wasted movement. Malcolm stood beside her, taking notes, arranging the flow of people entering. On her left sat the HR representative. On her right, the in-house attorney. They had all seen the video. Their faces were tight, and no one dared breathe too loudly. The door opened. The first witness stepped in, Darren. He did not wait for an invitation. He pulled out a chair, sat down, and leaned forward slightly, like someone stepping into battle on her side. His eyes were steady, his voice firm and clear. I'll speak plainly. I have never seen discrimination this blatant on a commercial flight. He described every detail, the way Rebecca's tone shifted in a single heartbeat between Jasmine and the white passenger, the way she checked the ticket, the way she handled the water service, the way she used the word belong like an anchor to press Jasmine down. There was no exaggeration, no dramatization, only a man with a conscience recounting a truth that could not be bent. Jasmine did not nod, did not praise, did not react emotionally. She simply observed her face shaped to receive the truth without distortion. The door opened again. Alicia entered. She placed her phone on the table. The screen paused on the video clip that had already become the center of the storm. I recorded from the moment Rebecca said she didn't belong in this cabin. Alicia's voice trembled slightly, but it wasn't fear. It was anger. HR handed over a USB. Alicia transferred the file. The video played on the large monitor. Rebecca's strained expression, the chilling silence of the first-class cabin. No one in the room spoke. Even the attorney, trained to detach from emotion, shifted in his seat and pressed his lips together. Alicia added, "This isn't the first time I've seen this happen on a Coast Air flight. But this is the first time someone pushed back strongly enough." That sentence made Jasmine tilt her head slightly, not because she felt proud, but because she felt sorrow. It confirmed what she had known for a long time. This was not an incident. This was a pattern, a habit, a culture poisoned over time. The door opened a third time. Harold walked in his cane, tapping lightly on the tile floor. He needed no introduction. The entire room instinctively rose. Harold sat, inhaled deeply, then spoke with the voice of a man who had witnessed half a century of the same injustice repeating itself. "I've flown this route for 30 years. Not once has my ticket gone unchecked, fewer than at least one extra time." He looked at Jasmine, not seeking agreement, but passing to her a lifetime of forced silence. "When you stood up on that plane, I felt like maybe this could finally end." Jasmine leaned toward him slightly, an unspoken gesture of respect. HR bit her lip. The attorney nodded slowly, as if engraving each word into his mind for the report he knew would shake the executive board. When Harold left, a heavy silence blanketed the room. Then the last person entered. Rebecca. No trace of authority remained, no confidence, no armor of self-righteousness. She sat down, with red eyes, her hands wringing together. She tried to speak first, but Jasmine raised her hand. "We ask, you answer." Rebecca stiffened, then nodded. Her voice was small, broken, unsteady. "I was just following procedures that our supervisors taught us." Jasmine stared at her. "What procedures? Which document? Which signature?" Rebecca went silent. She looked at the attorney. "At HR. No one stepped in to save her. There is no document, but it's how we were told we should act." Jasmine rolled the pen between her fingers, a tiny movement that echoed in the room like a ticking countdown. Told by whom? Rebecca stammered, her throat tightening. She knew whatever she said, or failed to say, would expose a hole far bigger than herself. I don't remember exactly. It's just an unspoken guideline. Everyone does it. Jasmine leaned forward, her voice low and heavy, as if each word was forged from metal. You are telling me that discrimination is an unofficial part of Coast Air's service culture. Rebecca gasped for breath. I didn't mean that. You only did what you assumed you were allowed to do. Jasmine finished her voice, not loud, but powerful enough to make the entire room contract inward. And that is the problem. Not anger, not insult, just truth. Raw, unavoidable. Rebecca lowered her head. Her shoulders trembled. Not because Jasmine had cornered her, but because for the first time in her life, she was being forced to face her actions without the shield of habit colleagues or the system itself. Jasmine rose. The internal investigation begins immediately. All reports will be sent to the board of directors today, and I will examine every detail. Malcolm leaned in. It's time for your leadership meeting. Jasmine gathered her files. Without looking around, she knew every pair of eyes in the room was following her movements. Not because they feared her, but because they knew she was about to carry this entire story straight to the people who believed they could bury it forever. The hallway leading to the executive conference room at Coast Air headquarters felt like a wire pulled to its final limit. Every employee who passed glanced at Jasmine, then quickly looked away, as if holding her gaze too long might pull them into the center of the storm that had been rising since morning. Malcolm walked beside her fast, but still half a step behind her position of respect. The elevator opened and carried them to the top floor. The doors closed with a small metallic chime, sharp and final, like a sign that there was no turning back. Are you ready? Malcolm asked, though he already knew the answer. There is no ready, Jasmine replied. There is only what must be done. When the elevator doors slid open, the entire executive floor was silent. No typing, no phone calls, none of the usual office hum, only the stillness of an organization that knew a decisive moment had arrived. The CEO's assistant waited at the large wooden doors of the conference room. She nodded tensely. They are all inside. Jasmine did not respond. She placed her hand on the door handle and pushed it open. The air inside was nothing like the hallway. It was thick, heavy, as if every molecule held pressure and judgment. 13 board members turned their heads at once. Some looked at her with a tightly contained curiosity. Others, especially Howard Blackwell in the corner seat, looked at her like she was a blade pointing directly at them. CEO Richard Harrington stood. Miss Carter, thank you for coming. Jasmine pulled out a chair and sat immediately without waiting to be invited. It was not disrespect. It was the declaration of a new order. Richard cleared his throat. We are here because of the incident on Flight 2874. The video has spread faster than expected. Before we discuss solutions, we want to hear directly from you. Jasmine opened the folder in front of her. No rushing, no trembling, no wasted motions. Each page turned like a piece of evidence in a high-profile case. What happened on this morning's flight, she began, was not an incident. Several board members frowned, but Jasmine continued. It was the outcome of a system that has rotted, a system that allows discrimination to repeat itself until it becomes habit, until the people performing it no longer recognize it as wrong. Howard let out a sharp, metallic laugh like steel scraping glass. So you are saying our entire staff is racist? Jasmine didn't look at him. I am saying the system allows them to act without accountability when they are. Her words hit the table like a weight. Several members shifted. Others shot Howard a look, silently urging him not to inflame the situation further. Jasmine clicked the remote. Alicia's video appeared on the large screen. No one spoke as Rebecca's words, "Where you belong," echoed through the room. Richard set his pen down. "This is truly unacceptable." Howard snapped. "But cancelling the whole flight, do you realize the financial loss?" "The press is calling it impulsive." Jasmine turned her head and looked at him for the first time. Impulsive is allowing this to happen for decades, without changing anything. Howard fell silent, not defeated, but unable to produce a retort sharp enough to pierce the truth she had laid in front of him. Jasmine continued presenting. Every witness statement, every statistic, every video clip, every pattern of biased behavior she had observed from the gate to the first-class cabin. She did not use emotion. She used truth. And truth delivered in a calm voice, cut deeper than any emotional plea could. It was not just Rebecca. Jasmine concluded. This is a behavioral pattern, and patterns only change when the structure that enables them is changed. The in-house attorney finally spoke. "So in your view, what does Coast-Air need to do?" Jasmine answered instantly. She had prepared for this long before today. "Retrain the entire front-line team, implement mandatory standardized procedures, establish an independent review board for complaints, rebuild the internal monitoring program, and appoint a new head for the training division." A board member asked, "Do you have a candidate in mind?" "Yes." "Jordan Baker." Heads nodded around the table. Jordan was respected in the industry. No one could argue, but Howard still resisted. "I still think cancelling the flight was excessive." Jasmine paused. The room froze for a heartbeat. "Cancelling the flight was necessary," she said slowly, "because for the first time in this company's history, discriminatory behavior was not covered with an apology email or a closed-door meeting." Richard stepped in, his voice low and decisive. "I agree with Ms. Carter." The board members exchanged looks. One said, "I agree as well," then another, and another, until nearly the entire table. Finally, Richard announced, "Ms. Carter will have full authority to implement the reform program, quarterly reports to the board." The decision passed. The atmosphere shifted. Tension dissolved, replaced by a clear shift in power. Jasmine gathered her papers and stood. In that moment, everyone in the room understood one thing. She had not just redirected a meeting. She had redirected the future of Coast-Air. As she turned to leave, Richard gently touched her arm. "You just made a powerful enemy," he said quietly. Jasmine looked straight toward the door, her voice calm and unwavering. "I did not come here to make friends." And she left the conference room like someone who had just begun a battle. She had long been prepared to fight one she had no intention of retreating from. Night had already fallen when Jasmine left Coast-Air headquarters. Streetlights stretched into cold streaks of white, reflecting off the limousine windows as it carried her back to her Buckhead apartment. The city was still loud, but inside the car there was only a heavy, unmoving silence. She leaned her head back and closed her eyes for a single second. Not to rest, but to keep herself from sinking into the exhaustion, threading through every muscle. Her phone vibrated non-stop. Messages from the media, emails from the PR department, notifications from social platforms. Hashtags about the flight were climbing into the top ranks. Edited clips, outraged comments, fierce debates. The truth was spreading like a live current, impossible to contain. Jasmine opened her eyes and silenced every alert. She did not need to hear more. She knew this story would burn for days, and she also knew the fire was not the hardest part. The hardest part was the silence. The moment when the noise fell away and left room for emptiness. When there were no more meetings, no more testimonies, no more people calling her name. Only a quiet room and one woman wondering, am I really changing anything? Or am I fighting a shadow too big to see the outcome? She entered her apartment. Familiar darkness washed over her split only by the glow of the city outside. She did not turn on the lights. She set her bag on the chair, poured a glass of water, then sank into the sofa, as if her body had finally slipped out of plated armor. The landline rang. Only a few people had that number. Jasmine answered. "Daughter," her father's voice. William Carter's came warm but heavy. Jasmine rested her head against the sofa, her eyes half closed. "You saw the news already?" "Yes." "Your mother too." "All day." There was a sound in the background, her mother calling out, "Your father says you should not skip dinner." Jasmine let out a small, rare laugh. "I am fine." A light silence followed. Then William spoke again, low and sincere. "You did something today that people have not dared to do for decades, but I know it took a toll on you. Are you all right?" Jasmine opened her eyes, watching the city lights reflect across the ceiling. "I am not sure," she admitted. "It needed to happen. But it cost more than I expected. Things like this always cost a lot," William said. "But someone still has to do them. And this time, that someone is you." Jasmine felt her throat tighten. Not from weakness, but from a quiet ache built over years of being doubted, judged, looked through, as if she needed permission to exist in spaces she had earned through ability. "Maybe I am just tired of being strong for so long," she whispered. "Then let yourself be tired," William said. "But tomorrow you will stand up again. You may not know it yet, but today you showed an entire generation that we do not have to accept this anymore." When the call ended, Jasmine sat still, her breath slowly deepening. Not peace, but enough stillness to remain upright. She was about to stand when her phone lit up. A message from Darren. "Just saw the news." You did not stand up only for yourself. You stood up for all of us. A second message followed. "My company spends more than $2 million a year on CoStar. We will support any change you make." A new email arrived from Harold. Just one line, "Thank you. Because of you, my granddaughter will live in a different world." Jasmine exhaled softly. Not relieved, but affirmed that what she did was not in vain. Then the phone rang again. Malcolm this time. His voice held immediate urgency. "Jasmine, we have a new problem." Jasmine closed her eyes briefly. "Rebecca." "Yes." Malcolm sighed. "She just gave an interview on Channel 7. She says you abused your power. Says she is being made a scapegoat." Jasmine stood her hand, tightening on the sofa, her gaze shifting from exhaustion to cold steel. "Show me." She turned on the television. Rebecca appeared, swollen eyes, trembling voice, still trying to shift responsibility. "I serve all passengers. I was forced to become an example. CoStar wants to appease the public. They used me as a pawn." Jasmine watched without blinking, a frightening calm, the calm of someone who saw beyond tears and excuses, straight into the truth beneath. "What do you want me to do?" Malcolm asked. Jasmine switched off the TV. "Nothing," she said. "Because the problem is not her, then what is it, the system, that made her believe she was right?" Jasmine walked toward the window. The city stretched below, glowing like a vast, illuminated chessboard. "Tomorrow we begin. prepare the meeting with the union, and build the list for the team who will design the reform program. Malcolm nodded through the phone, clearly hearing the shift in her voice. She was no longer responding to a crisis. She was preparing for a long war. "Jasmine," he said, "you know this is going to make a lot of people turn against you." She stared out at the city, the lights reflecting in her cold, focused eyes. "Good," she replied. "That means it is important." And in that quiet moment, everything became clear. She was no longer fighting because of a flight, not because of insults, not because of Rebecca. She was fighting for everyone who had never had a voice, and the fight was only just beginning. The next morning didn't begin with sunlight. It began with pressure. Heavy, cold, sharp. The kind of pressure that would make most people want to hide under the covers. But Jasmine was not most people. She opened her eyes and sat up instantly, as if her body had been pre-programmed to switch into battle mode. In the bathroom mirror, her face reflected the exhaustion, but it also reflected something stronger than exhaustion will. She tied her hair back, buttoned her shirt, fastened her vest. Every motion was decisive, as if she were sealing herself back into armor. When she stepped out of the elevator at Coast Air headquarters, every eye followed her. Not out of curiosity, out of fear. And hope. Two opposites blending into a fragile atmosphere. Malcolm was already waiting outside her office. "Rebecca's interview spread fast last night," he said as she approached. "But not everyone is turning against you. A lot of people are supporting you. Both the media and frontline staff." "Good," Jasmine replied. "And the bad news, the union wants to meet immediately. They think you are pushing Rebecca out of the industry." Jasmine opened her office door. They will hear the truth. The large meeting room was packed when she entered. The union representatives, long-standing figures with stern expressions, sat in a row, their eyes sharp like steel, as if testing whether she would bend. The union president crossed his arms. "Ms. Carter, we are here because of the backlash from the flight attendants. They say you are using Rebecca as an example to intimidate the entire workforce." Jasmine placed her documents on the table. Straight posture, unwavering gaze. "I am not intimidating," she said. "I am repairing." The room shifted slightly. The president narrowed his eyes. "You talk as if all our flight attendants are the problem." "Not them," Jasmine replied. "The culture that trained them. A culture that has been distorted. A culture that made people believe that scrutinizing black passengers more closely is normal. A culture that turned discrimination into habit." Several people shifted in their seats. Others tried to keep their faces neutral, but their tightened lips betrayed them. Jasmine continued, "I am not fixing Rebecca. I am fixing the system that made her think this was allowed." The president stared at her for a long moment, his eyes no longer sharp, but weighing. "So what do you want from us?" "Partnership," Jasmine answered. "Because if we do not stand together, everything will keep sliding downhill." She handed out two proposals, one for the union, one for the flight attendants. Not a thick stack of meaningless policy, just foundational changes, unified standards of conduct, transparent complaint processes, mandatory, implicit bias training. Silence lingered for several minutes. Then the president nodded. "We will try," he said. "But if you get this wrong, we will push back." Jasmine did not blink. "I expect your oversight." As the group left the room, Malcolm let out a long breath. "You just accomplished what people spend entire careers trying to do." Jasmine simply replied, "This is only the first day." She headed straight to the training floor. Jordan Baker stood in the center, setting up for the first pilot training session. When Jordan turned and saw Jasmine, her eyes shone with strength and conviction. "I am ready." Jasmine stepped inside, scanning the cabin simulator, the new training toolkit, the process charts, outlining fair service standards. The air carried the scent of transformation, something being rebuilt from the ground up. "Begin," Jasmine said. Jordan smiled. "I am going to show them how an airline can be different." The training began with Alicia's video. Not to shame Rebecca, not to spark anger, but to make one message unmistakable: this is something we will never allow again. Many attendants lowered their eyes. Some frowned, others exhaled like someone had finally spoken aloud what they had witnessed for years but were never permitted to say. An older man raised his hand. "I have seen this for a long time. I reported it before. Nobody acted." Jasmine looked at him. "That is why starting today we will act." The session continued. The energy in the room shifted, from defensive to aware, from aware to understanding, and from understanding to commitment. When the training ended, a young flight attendant approached Jasmine, holding her clipboard close to her chest, her voice small but sincere. "Thank you for giving us a chance to do this right." Jasmine looked at her. Not to redo, to do right. As she left the room, Malcolm hurried toward her, his face slightly pale. "New updates," he said. 3 major media outlets want interviews. 2 civil rights organizations reached out. And the board wants preliminary metrics in 3 days. Jasmine didn't slow her pace. "Prepare everything. I will handle it." "Do you feel overwhelmed?" Malcolm asked, worried. Jasmine stopped in front of the elevator, her eyes fixed on a distant point, as if she were looking through the glass tower, through the city, through the many years of silence she was trying to break. "No," she said. "I feel like I am finally moving in the right direction." And as the elevator doors closed, her expression was not one of fatigue or fear. It was the expression of someone who was reshaping a system, one decision at a time, one person at a time, one flight at a time, and she was not going to stop. The afternoon passed in a relentless rhythm, emails, reports, a stream of small meetings, summaries from HR, risk assessments from the legal department. But by the end of the day, Jasmine realized something. This was the easy part. The hard part was sitting right inside her office, years of accumulated files, complaints that had been brushed aside, customer letters. No one ever read internal reports, trimmed down to protect the company image. She sat at her desk with a past that CoStar had abandoned lying open in front of her. Malcolm entered, carrying another stack of folders. "I found these in the old archives. A lot of complaints from 20 years ago." Jasmine set the stack down and looked at the yellowed covers. 20 years. Which means this problem existed before I even started my career. "And no one touched it," Malcolm said. "Until now." Jasmine opened the first file, a handwritten letter from a black woman removed from her first-class seat after being accused of sitting in the wrong place. The second letter, an Asian passenger checked 3 times in a row. The third, an elderly brown-skinned man denied beverage service because of priority limitations. Each letter pierced the truth like a needle. What had happened to Jasmine yesterday was not an incident. It was simply the latest link in a chain no one wanted to look at. Jasmine closed the letters and took a deep breath. It may take us years to fix this, but at least we have started. Before she could continue, the internal phone rang. Malcolm answered, nodded, and handed it to her. "It is Jordan." Jasmine brought the phone to her ear. "What is it?" Jordan spoke quickly, urgent, but still controlled. "I am reviewing the training history. There are a lot of unwritten procedures that older teams passed down. No documentation, no official guidance, no oversight. Just experience, how it is usually done. This type of customer tends to cause trouble." Jasmine closed her eyes. "I am guessing it is more widespread than we thought. So widespread that many people believe it is an actual rule." Jasmine opened her eyes. "Clear all of it. Remove every practice that is not official policy. Rewrite everything from scratch. Standardize every step." "Understood," Jordan replied. "And Jasmine, thank you for giving me this chance. A lot of people want change. They just never had someone at the top they could trust." The call ended. Jasmine set the phone down. A small warmth flickered in her chest, not much, but enough to remind her why she fought. Malcolm asked, "Are you ready for the early preliminary report with the board?" "Almost, but I need more data." As if anticipating it, Malcolm placed another analysis on the desk. "Here, complaint data from the last 5 years. This is the pattern complaints from white passengers stay almost the same. But from Black, Latin, and Asian passengers, they rise in cycles, each year higher than the last." Jasmine reviewed the chart. She did not need long to understand it. It was too clear. "This is the evidence they cannot deny," she said. "This is not coincidence. Not individual error. It is a trend. And trends do not exist without systems behind them." Malcolm looked at her, admiration flickering in his eyes. "You know, anyone else would have run from this battlefield in the first week." Jasmine gave a faint smile. "Because others fly through it. I grew up in airports like these." A knock sounded at the door. It was the in-house attorney. "Ms. Carter, you need to see this." He placed a tablet in front of her. On the screen, a newly posted article, "Co-Star, K-O-O, the woman who could change the entire industry." Jasmine scrolled through it. No smile, no sense of satisfaction. She knew the media only saw the surface. What they did not see was the long nights in the office, the decisions that pleased no one, the internal political battles, the fearful, cautious, sometimes hostile looks. She set the tablet down. "We have not changed an industry. We have changed one flight." The attorney rested his hand on the chair. "But that is how every change begins." Malcolm's phone buzzed. He checked it, and his face softened. "Good news," he said. "Passenger satisfaction from this morning's test route is up, especially from the groups usually overlooked." Jasmine nodded. A small step. Her own phone lit up. Another email from the communications director. "We have received more than 3,000 messages thanking you for yesterday's decision." Jasmine read it, her expression growing still as deep water. Not pride, not excitement, but a clear awareness that she was no longer fighting alone. She stood. "Let's go," she said. Malcolm blinked. "Where? 14th floor. Communications department. For what? To write the official statement. Not to calm the public. Not to counter Rebecca." She looked at him, her voice low, but sharp enough to slice through the air. "But to make sure Co-Star can no longer hide behind silence." She walked out of the office, her heels striking the polished stone floor with steady, purposeful rhythm, each step driving another stake into the foundation of change. The first day ended, but the reform had only just begun. From the perspective of a systemic justice expert, This story is not just the journey of one individual standing up against injustice, but a reminder of how power can shape, distort, or redeem an entire culture. Real change does not come from polished apologies. It comes from decisions that dare to confront a system that has been misaligned for far too long. Jasmine proves that one timely action can open the door for thousands of voices that were once forced into silence. If you believe justice needs people who dare to rise, hit like and subscribe to help spread the power of meaningful change, and leave a comment with the phrase "Stand tall" to show that you choose to stand on the side of what is right.